Hello and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum, Tech and Talent Strategies for Workforce Success. My name is Vicki Lynn Brunskill with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. I have some important information to share with you, and then we're going to turn the floor over to our esteemed opening keynote speaker. First, we'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, GP. Our sponsors are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience today. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booth from the main agenda page, and those include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. So for those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag Argyle Digital and follow us on X, formerly Twitter, at Argyle Exec Forum. Also, please be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. And I just want to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we received over the years from our members. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you received a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints throughout today's event, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you. So during each session, we encourage you to submit your questions and comments into the Q&A box on your screen. And following each presentation, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on some of those questions. Thank you again for joining us. And now let's get started. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Alejandra Para Orlandoni, VP of Ethical Innovation and Privacy at Takeda. We are so excited to have Alejandra with us for her opening keynote presentation titled Building a Better Workplace with Technology. Welcome, Alejandra. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Vicki Lynn. Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. We're going to spend the next several minutes or so addressing how technology can improve the workplace and some practical considerations for making sure that technology investments have a positive impact on your workforce. I want to jump right in, so I'm going to keep introductions brief. And as a quick disclaimer, I'm speaking today on my own behalf, so all views are mine and don't reflect the views of my employer. As Vicki Lynn said, I'm currently at Takeda, a global pharmaceutical company. I lead our ethical innovation and privacy team for the global portfolio division, which covers about 80 countries. Before joining Takeda, I worked at Meta and McKinsey, and I have previous experience as an engineer, a naval officer, and an attorney. And right now, these days, I focus on responsible innovation, which includes questions around how we adopt and use technology responsibly, which is a great segue, because today we're going to talk about technology's role in making the workplace better. And this includes how technology can support the tasks and responsibilities of human resources as a function, as well as how technology can contribute to broader organizational and people-related goals that human resources helps to support. But a big question is, what do we think better means? And once we've defined better, how do we go about bringing that to life? So here's our roadmap for today. We'll break down these questions into three themes: the benefits of technology in the workplace, the challenges of technology, and finally, the practical steps and considerations for evolving beyond legacy mindsets, where we can capture more of the upside of technology and avoid that downside. So I'm not going to hide the ball. The grand takeaway, the kind of too long didn't read version of everything we cover today, is that building a better workplace with technology has two critical, non-negotiable requirements. First, it's that people have to stay at the center of it all. I'm sure this sounds obvious to many of you in the audience, and you may even be nodding in agreement. The thing is, it's super easy to get distracted by shiny technologies, by cost-saving metrics, by what competitors are doing. So in theory, keeping people at the center should be straightforward, should be easy, but in practice, it's quite difficult. So we'll talk about how to do that. And the second is that trust must be the foundation for any technology implementation. And this includes trust between organizational leaders and employees, managers and their teams, and employees and the technologies you choose to adopt. So everything we cover today will build on these two requirements. All right, so let's start with the upside of technology. Usually, the very first thing on the list is increasing productivity and efficiency. We always hear about streamlining work these days. We talk about automating boring, repetitive tasks. I'm personally a huge fan of this. And there's a lot of data to back up the claims that technology can actually do this for us. In fact, I'm sure many of you these days have seen all sorts of newsletters and articles about how generative AI in particular is doing this for a lot of workplaces. And this kind of increasing productivity and efficiency, it's super important for establishing a sound business case for technology investments. And it's good. It's good for people. We want things to be more efficient and more streamlined. But if productivity and efficiency are all we're imagining, there are two big problems. The first is that we're setting ourselves up to be slaves to technology at work. The tech will always be faster than us, which means we'll be running around behind to check and make sure everything's working right, filling interconnectivity gaps between tools. I mean, just think about those days where you can't seem to keep your unread emails from growing and your chat app from dinging nonstop, and you're getting text messages from a colleague, and you're on your fifth virtual meeting of the day, and all you really want is some water, but you haven't had a chance. I mean, all of these tools by themselves boost productivity and efficiency, but they can also be exhausting and overwhelming. So we need to think about other goals beyond productivity and efficiency. Now, the second main problem with this is that it really sells short the value technology can bring into the workplace. So we're going to discuss some of these other benefits and the other kinds of value technology can bring. The first is fostering collaboration. A lot of you have, you're pros at this by now, especially post-COVID. Technology is great for overcoming geography as a barrier. People can get together, exchange ideas. They can establish deeper relationships, kind of keep that human touch despite distance. Tech also enables asynchronous communication and collaboration, commenting on a Google Doc, adding a sticky note to a virtual whiteboard, advancing a workflow to the next step. And asynchronous communication and collaboration is great because it gives people a chance to contribute at the moment that's best for them. So maybe not everyone on your team is a morning person, or perhaps one of your team members has caretaker responsibilities that limit afternoon availability, for example. Or you have a global team and finding time for live collaboration is tough because of time zone differences. So fostering collaboration is a huge benefit. And this is kind of a nice segue to another benefit of technology in the workplace, which is improving inclusion and equity. There's been a lot said and written on this topic: the World Economic Forum, major consulting firms, academic publications. And some examples of how technology improves inclusion and equity include helping with less biased people decision-making processes at scale. So imagine in talent acquisition or advancement within a company. Raising awareness of bias and enabling people to act on it. So think about pay equity, performance assessments, disciplinary actions. It also helps to remove barriers for people who are differently abled, which is estimated to be about 15% of the world's population. Talk about a talent pool that is probably largely untapped. And one specific example is there's a lot of new technology that assists people with visual impairment. So another example of how technology is enabling and improving inclusion and equity is how it enables flexible work arrangements. This has been critical for certain demographic groups. So in 2023, the Women in Workplace report by leanin.org and McKinsey found that women with flexible work arrangements experienced increased sense of belonging, greater psychological safety, and fewer microaggressions. And these results were even more pronounced for other groups like women of color, LGBTQ women, and women with disabilities. So there's a lot to be said for how technology can improve inclusion and equity. And another area is increasing engagement. So new McKinsey research has calculated the staggering cost of employee disengagement. It's expensive. And of course, technology is never going to be a magic wand, but turns out that it can help. When employees see their organizations investing in a technology to modernize the workplace, they're more likely to see their companies as innovative. Employees can also see when leadership is investing in their experience. And all of these things inspire confidence in leadership and the organization itself, which evokes pride and it drives engagement. So we talk about a place with better collaboration, improved inclusivity, improved engagement. All of these things add up to fodder for sparking innovation. And the link between all of these is pretty intuitive, but luckily, we don't have to rely on intuition because there's been plenty of data to back it up. So a workplace where technology is improving collaboration inclusivity and engagement has a much greater chance of improving innovation. And this is important because of the link between cultures of innovation and productivity and success. So where does that leave us? You'll note that each of the benefits that we just talked about have at least one thing in common. They're all about how people work together and interact together and how technology can enhance that. So, as promised, builds on one of the two requirements that I mentioned earlier. Now, that's the good stuff. Let's talk about some of the challenges to technology adoption in the workplace. This first one may sound so obvious, you think it could go without saying. But what I've seen is that it's actually a lot more challenging than it sounds. And that's to ensure the technology tools you invest in are actually useful. Now, this requires analysis along at least two dimensions. The first being, do you have a clear understanding of how these tools will help you and your teams do your work better or faster or more efficiently? And another way to put it is, have you chosen the right tools for the job? The second dimension is, do you have the necessary infrastructure in place to support your digital tool selection? So, for example, does your hardware support the apps you've chosen? If you'll be relying on connected devices, do all of your employees have good internet access? Do you have cloud services, data architecture, cybersecurity measures in place? So all of these things are pretty practical, but turns out that you can't take these kinds of questions for granted. Another challenge may be less obvious to those of us who are technophiles or who are really comfortable in super dynamic and uncertain environments. And that's the challenge of helping organizations to overcome resistance to change. Adopting new tools and technologies can be really disruptive, and it can cause a lot of anxiety about technology taking jobs. In fact, the fear of becoming obsolete in the US due to technology, it grew more in the past 2 years than any other time since 2017, according to a Gallup survey. So that's pretty significant. Bringing technology into the workplace has to be bolstered by a culture of learning and innovation, and it has to be accompanied with empathy for what the people in the organization who are going to be expected to use these new technologies are thinking and feeling. So a third challenge is kind of related to this, and it involves closing the digital skills gap. If you're going to adopt technologies in the workplace, you have to invest in training on how to use new tools, explain how it fits into workflows, kind of allow for healthy adjustment periods. And this kind of training has to be tailored to the audience because you can have the best tools in place, but they're irrelevant if no one knows how to use them. Some of you may recognize this scene from the movie Zoolander where they have to download files and where they're told the files are in the computer. They take it literally and smash the computer open to get those files. I mean, the reference is meant to be humorous, but imagine how overwhelming all of these changes happening with generative AI and cloud-based interconnected tools can be to people. So closing that digital skills gap, kind of taking the mystery out of it, is a big part of it. And the final challenge I'll mention today is considering the impact on organizational culture. As you consider the types of daily routines and interactions across an organization that come out of new technology tools, imagine what those new routines and interactions might look like in the aggregate across the organization over time. Will it lead to new ways of working, new behavioral norms, maybe new roles? And then you ask yourself if this future of the organization still aligns with your values and culture. And if the answer is yes, that's great. If the answer is no, or you're not sure, maybe that's a signal to take a pause before moving forward. Now, I like this particular little comic because although it's not framed in terms of technology, it reflects how technology can shape our work culture. Working remotely and workplace monitoring, which are mentioned in this comic, are both things that tech enables. So, what kind of workplace are we creating with our tech tools is the question. So, the challenges we covered are fueled by things like fear, uncertainty, lack of transparency, support, and understanding. And these are exactly the types of things we can address by establishing trust, which is, as I promised earlier, one of the foundational requirements for building a better workplace with technology. So, how do we make it happen? We'll get practical now. So, how do we get more of the benefits while effectively addressing the challenges? And the first thing to note is that very few uses of technology in the workplace are tried and true at this point. What does that mean? It means we're doing a lot of experimenting, all of us. And that also means successful adoption of technology should be an ongoing, iterative process. So the steps we cover in a moment should never be one-time activities, but rather steps you revisit periodically. First, like with any initiative, it's really important to articulate where we'd like to go. So you must clarify your vision and goals in adoption of technology in the workplace. If you can't paint a picture of where you're going, who's going to follow you? And even if the picture isn't fully formed yet, at least you can get a sense of the direction. And it's okay not to have a picture that's fully formed. I should state it a little bit more directly. And as you're clarifying visions and goals, you really want to take into account your organization's work and what makes sense in that context. So, for example, a technology in the workplace for a manufacturing organization probably looks pretty different than technology in the workplace for a knowledge work organization. You also want to think about what's useful for your teams, kind of circling back to that theme from earlier, what your company's business goals are and what your budget is, because that's a very practical constraint. So the concrete steps here are, don't shy away from hard questions. One particularly tough question for a lot of workplaces is remote versus in-person work. This can be really controversial and a tough one to tackle. Don't shy away from it. How to invest in tech is another. Sometimes when companies are going through, fiscal pressures, it's tough to make the decision to invest in one part of the technology stack versus another. Don't shy away from those hard questions. The second concrete step here is distinguish fundamental from incremental shifts. What degree of experimentation with technology do we want? Do we want to be fast followers? Do we want to be on the cutting edge of digital tools? So it might be super transformational for an organization. And I think trying to clarify that can take you a long ways. Second thing here is we want to secure leadership buy-in. Cross-functional alignment is a must. Implementing technology in the workplace, it just can't happen successfully in a silo. It needs departments to work together. And just to be crystal clear, this isn't really an option, it's a must for both practical and kind of more cultural and organizational values reasons. So concrete steps here are work to establish clear priorities across different functions. So this helps to avoid working against each other. For example, if the enterprise tech team wants to invest in virtual reality meeting rooms, but much of the workforce is remote in areas without solid internet connection, or employee feedback has been that people already feel well connected with existing virtual conference tools, then maybe that sort of investment might come at the expense of something else that may be more impactful. So trying to align across those types of priorities is really helpful. And again, kind of figuring out the cross-functional alignment is a must. Your IT and your tech teams they'll help to build the backbone of any tech stack. They'll help you understand what's possible. They'll usually know the latest and greatest of what's out there. Finance obviously will help with budget, but also help to forecast the value add of technology in the workplace. Legal and compliance are going to make sure that you can stay aligned with regulations, make sure that your third-party contracts are set up in the way that they need to be. Business and function leads can clarify what you actually need, what workflows need help. So in this case, what does human resources need? Project management, comms personnel, they can help keep things aligned and moving in the same direction, keep people informed. And HR, in this case, less as a customer per se and more as a business partner, ensure that alignment with what the workforce wants and needs, help with learning and help with upskilling. So that cross-functional leadership buy-in is absolutely critical. And then make a plan around responsible data use. As you build out your tech stack, before you know it, you'll have a ton of data on your hands. This can quickly become overwhelming, unwieldy. As an example, a lot of organizational leaders are wanting to track in-person versus remote work. Perfectly reasonable thing to want to track. But something like this can quickly become a privacy nightmare. And without proper transparency by organizations, leaders, and privacy and security safeguards in place, employees can start to see this as, for example, workplace surveillance, which can quickly undermine trust. And by the way, it can also get quickly out of hand if there's a perceived privacy violation that's egregious enough that someone leaks it to the press, which never happens these days, right? So yeah, the responsible data management is really important. And it's, we want to be really good stewards of data. This is especially important with HR data, which includes some of the most sensitive information about people. So concrete steps involve data professionals early: data science, data architecture, data security and privacy, risk management experts who focus on technology. This will be a huge help. And the other thing you want to do is use your vision and goals that you defined in that first step as the foundation and ask, do we need this data to reach our goals? And that can help you to keep from accumulating sensitive data you don't need and probably don't want to be responsible for. Okay, so then the next step here is establish a communication strategy. And this is important because it sets the narrative and tone around your technology transformation. It gives people space to digest the changes, make plans for changes. And the more transparency and authenticity, the better. I know that kind of goes without saying sometimes, but it's really important. These are the things that help to maintain the trust. And so for concrete steps here, you want to develop and share a coherent narrative that articulates the value for employees of whatever your technology investments are. Why is it good for them? How is it going to help them? And in these communications, you want to set balanced expectations because overpromising just tends to disappoint people. These communications can take the form of emails, town halls, video messages. And one thing that is really useful is creating talking points for managers so that messages that cascade throughout the organization can maintain a level of consistency while giving managers the opportunity to tailor the messaging and the execution of the messaging to their teams. The other thing is make it a two-way street. Ask me anythings, focus groups, FAQs that are kind of constantly updated. That way your teams and your organization feel less like technology is happening to them and more like they're a part of the evolution in the organization. And the final thing that we'll cover today is you want to design good incentives. This is the stuff that will make teams feel involved and empowered and motivated. It sets a positive tone for any sort of tech transformation. It avoids negative defensive stances from kind of really galvanizing. And some concrete steps here are you want to establish shared cross-functional goals. Earlier we talked about securing leadership buy-in, but maybe you want to design some KPIs that have cross-functional accountability. You really want to use these kinds of shared goals to avoid competition or conflict across functions. And then you want to reward people who embrace and contribute to successful tech integration. So some examples I've seen that are really effective are spotlighting teams who have piloted new tools, allow them to share their experience, their lessons learned, tips, kind of like a testimonial. And one thing that's really helpful is highlighting how the company in some way has incorporated any feedback that team may have shared. Another example is asking for teams to volunteer to try out new tools or participate in a focus group and give them a small reward, gift card, team lunch, something like that. And then if you're offering training to your organization, make it official, provide some certificates. You've reached a gold standard of digital competence, something like that kind of gets people motivated to learn and to keep learning. So we're coming to the end and I want to save time for questions. So I'll just briefly highlight the key takeaways here, which are that when it comes to technology, there are two critical factors required to ensure it makes the workplace actually better. You have to make it about the people, and you have to foster and build upon a foundation of trust. All right, so we will move on to questions. I see several coming in that are fantastic. So just give me a moment. Yeah, this is a great question. How can we strike a balance between leveraging cutting edge technologies and maintaining a human-centric approach in HR processes? Yeah, I think it's a great question because it kind of goes back to that the difficulty of kind of wanting to push things forward without losing sight of what you're actually there to do, which is to improve the experience or improve the performance or improve, some aspect of the workplace. And so I think that what's really important is to make sure that you talk to the people who are going to be using the technologies. Ask them, what do you need? Ask them, what's hard for you? What are your pain points? And really trying to understand and gather and internalize information about what it is that people want and need. And then weighing that next to whatever your company and business goals are, whatever targets you might have for, some sort of team performance or organizational performance, and then finding out what solutions can actually help to address not just your business goals, but also those pain points, those things that are making it harder for your people to execute whatever it is they're supposed to execute. So really, really important to take the time to listen and understand and internalize people's challenges, and then make decisions based off of that information. So great question. Another question that I see here, this is a great one. How can we stay ahead of the technology curve to ensure our processes remain effective and relevant? This is tough these days, especially because of how quickly technology is advancing and moving. I think what's really important is you've got to have people that are focused on reading what's happening out there. Like, for example, we have a few people on my team that are always reading the news, are always kind of in the mix of what is happening, are always kind of tracking the trends of what's happening in the external environment. Whether or not there are people in your organization who officially have that role, some organizations do, I can guarantee that there's at least, a handful of folks who are kind of just those future-looking folks that always have a hand or always have a finger on the pulse of what's happening. And I think that it's really, really helpful to keep that eye on future-looking trends so that you can then start to say, all right, let me see if I can cut through the fluff and let me see if I can try to understand what is hype and what is not, what is real, what is just, good marketing. And when you have that kind of information, that kind of person who just has their finger on the pulse, what you can then do is come back and again, kind of reevaluate where you are and what your goals are, how your tools are helping you to achieve those goals, and whether or not there's a new tool out there that can actually help improve or boost or enhance whatever it is that you're trying to do. So it's tough, but I think that exercise of always kind of keeping your head up and looking around, and then having that eye that is able to discern what's hype versus what's real is a critical help in making sure that you kind of stay ahead of the curve while still actually being effective. So thank you all. That's all the time we have today. And I'll turn it back over to you, Vicki Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you so much. What an excellent keynote. So many good points for those struggling with technology in HR. Thank you, Alejandra. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this session. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. Thank you, Alejandra.